Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White and this is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you so much for joining me. On this channel I like to talk about horror books and some science fiction and fantasy books. If that sounds like your bag, then please hit the subscribe button. Alright, so today is my From the Hip video, and it's number 11 I believe. And if you don't know what From the Hip is, then it's basically where I just like to shoot the shit, basically, and talk about some channel stuff, what's going on in my life, and I like to give some shout-outs, and I discuss some polls that I have going on in my on my channel here. So if you want to participate in those polls, you can do so easily. Either they'll show up in your timeline, or if they don't, then you can just go to my community tab on my profile page, and they're all there. All right, so first I'm gonna hit the shout outs here, and the first person I want to talk about is Fit to Be Read. This is he's new within the last year, I believe, and he discusses primarily, if not completely, science fiction books. He has a video out that he did recently that was just insane, and I think Media Death Cult has done a few of lists like these, but he did his top 150 science fiction books, and that he also recently did a live video with Rachel from the Shades of Orange, and in that live discussion, because the live discussion was about that list, he said that he had about 400 or 500 books in his science fiction folder over on Goodreads. And I was thinking, I have about 400 or 500 horror books in my Goodreads folder. And I was like, maybe I could do 150, a list of my favorite 150 horror books. And yeah, I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe something like that's coming in the future, but that is so overwhelming, such a huge task. So Mike, he reads a lot of science fiction, and I think he also said that he pretty much only reads science fiction. He reads some fantasy and then some horror after that, but he's a pretty fascinating guy, and he always tells you whether or not the book that he's reading, if he's reviewing books, whether or not it's fit to be read, and that's the name of his channel. So I highly recommend him. He's a lot of fun to watch, and I've been trying to gather a lot more science fiction recommendations recently, because I haven't read very many science fiction books, not as much as I would have liked to read. And so he's definitely, if you're into science fiction and you want to learn more about science fiction, definitely check him out. It's worth your time. And I also want to give a shout out to Bedtime Bookworm. This is Jade. Jade talks a lot about fantasy books, but she also talks a fair amount about horror books as well. But I would say primarily she talks about fantasy books. She recently went through, I've been watching her for years, I want to put up front. Since I started my booktube channel, she wasn't one of the first by any means, but she definitely came in there somewhere in the first year of me watching booktube, and I really enjoy her content. She recently came to some serious health issues, so I think it would be really cool if you could if you haven't checked her out already, go check her out now and subscribe and watch her videos. I would recommend just checking her out for her book content, because she reads a lot of really awesome books, and I enjoy listening to her take on the books that she's been reading. So that is Bedtime Bookworm and Jade. She's awesome. Let's go give her some love. All right, now on to the polls. All right, so I planned on doing this whole big vampire thing on the polls because I was planning on reading a whole bunch of vampire books to end the year, and well, that kind of changed, but that's okay. I'm still doing some vampire polls though, because I love vampires, and we're gonna get into that in a second. My first question was, how's your November going? And I asked that, I think it was about mid-November when I asked that, and I had the answers fantastic, good, don't ask, and effing awful. And my answer to that was effing awful, honestly, because this fall has been, it's been kind of terrible because of certain changes within my body. I think mostly due to me stopping taking my meds. It hasn't created a terrible response in me, but I noticed my depression, my SAD has gotten a lot worse this year, and I think it's because I'm not on my meds. I'm just hoping that my brain sort of resets itself, having lost weight and not being on carbs anymore. We'll see, though. So the answers that you guys gave was 17% said you were fantastic, which is great. I wish I was fantastic. 43% said they were just good, and that's good too. 29% said don't ask, and 11% said effing awful. They agreed with me on that. So let's hope that 2022 is a better year and full of better months. All right, now on to some of the vampire ones. I asked, if the vampire Lestat appeared in your room late at night and offered you the choice he never had, would you accept his dark gift and become a vampire? And the answers I had for this were, hell yes, let's do this. No, where's my steak? And finally, can I at least have a day or two to think about it? My answer on this is weird, because if it was, say, 20 years ago and I didn't have my son in my life and my wife, then I'd be like, hell yes, let's do this. But now things are different, and you don't want your son to become a vampire. So it's not like they can come with you. I guess now it'd be like, can I at least have a day or two to think about it? But I'd probably say no. Where's my steak, but no. I don't know. Let's get into your answers. 38%, this is the winner here, said, hell yes, let's do this. So that's interesting, because honestly, when I was going back to when I was a teen, I was obsessed with the Vampire Lestat and the Vampire Chronicles, and there was a part of me that really wanted one of those vampires to come visit me at night and give me their dark gift. I don't know why. I guess it's just being a teenager, I guess. I don't know. A little bit of a weird teenager too. So at least I'm not alone. 26% said, no, where's my steak? So Lestat might be in a bit of danger there. And 37% coming in at second here was, can I at least have a day or two to think about it? It's fair enough. All right. Now, the next one, I decided that maybe I'd go into like a death match with characters. I've seen people do this before, where they have like a list of characters who are going to fight to the death, or just fight and see who would win. And then they kind of go through the winners until you get a final winner overall. And I thought maybe I would try that. I don't know. We'll see, because honestly, there's not that many famous vampires in literature. There's only really a handful. So the first one I did was who would win a fight to the death, Dracula or Lestat? Now this one I find really interesting, because Dracula won by 84% and Lestat lost. I don't think people are giving Lestat the credit where it's due. I think all they see are the frills on his clothing. But Lestat was a very vicious vampire, and he also became a very powerful vampire. And he took down Akasha, if you think about it, the Queen of the Damned. And she was pretty much brutalizing the entire planet. She was way more powerful than Dracula ever was. So I think Lestat would win. In the comments for this poll, there was a discussion whether or not walking around in the day would benefit you, and I guess it would, because if you're a vampire and you can walk around in the day, then you can just obviously go and take care of the other vampire while they're sleeping. But well, both Dracula and Lestat, especially Lestat in the end, near the or later on within the trilogy, or even the first four books of the Vampire Chronicles, I think it was within Queen of the Damned. I think it was Queen of the Damned herself who made it so that Lestat was as powerful as he was, because he took her blood, he drank her blood, and he became very powerful. And he could walk around in the day as well. But there's somebody who said that Dracula, because he can walk around during the day. Well, they both could. I think people just don't realize how powerful Lestat is. And there's another thing, and this is a little bit of a spoiler for people who haven't read Dracula. But Dracula, once people start fighting back, he hightails it. He leaves. He's out of there. He's a bit of a pansy when it comes to anyone who shows that they might be able to beat him. And ultimately, a couple of humans went and defeated him. So Dracula's not that powerful. He's a bully. Once people stand up to him, he backs down. But Lestat, he'll keep fighting. He's a little bit of a prick. He'll keep fighting until he wins. So that's my take. I believe Lestat would win. All right, the next one I just did a few days ago. It doesn't have very many votes yet, but I said who would win in a death match, and between Kurt Barlow from Salem's Lot and Joshua York from Fever Dream. 86% went with Kurt Barlow, and I think that's probably a good choice because Joshua York, he's like the silent, withdrawn type. I don't know how powerful he was, but Kurt Barlow is a badass, so I don't know if I paired those two up very well. All right, so moving into a little bit more personal stuff. I titled this part, The Silly Way in Which My Brain Works, because I've been reading a lot of Star Wars books lately. I've been watching a lot of Star Wars content on YouTube. If you're unfamiliar with this and you like Star Wars and you love watching lore videos for your favorite things, go and check out some Star Wars videos. Like, I can't remember any of the people I've been watching right now. The Stupendous Wave is a good one. Star Wars Mag, and of course there's Star Wars Theory. They all do really awesome videos. And of course, I see this and I watch this, I consume it and I love it. And then there's that part of my brain that's like, let's do one of these ourselves. I don't know how many times I come across something I really enjoy and my brain automatically wants to do it itself. So it starts thinking another YouTube channel, or it starts thinking, also starts thinking, let's do a podcast on this. I have to rein myself in all the time. It's really annoying. Otherwise I don't have the time. You know what? If I had all the time in the world, if I was making a lot of money doing like this type of stuff, then sure, okay, let's do it. But I don't have the time. My job really kills a lot of my free time. And then there's family time too. So, man, I wish I could though, because lately I've been really obsessed with Star Wars. I don't know, the horror, it's always this time of year where reading horror kind of goes away. I don't know why that is. I think it's because I always feel the lack of sunlight, and I've always talked about pretty openly about my SAD. It basically makes me depressed, and I just don't want to deal with too many dark themed books, I guess you could say. I'm definitely not going to be reading any Jack Ketchum or the Girl Next Door type books. Yeah, that's like definitely off the table. I tend to go back to my comfort reads during November and December, and I've definitely been doing that. But you know, the craving for horror almost always comes back once the sun is on its way back north, and that's usually around January. So I guess we'll see. But in that time, you know, I didn't realize that I'd read so many indie horror authors, because recently I explained this in the video that I did for the my guide to reading indie horror authors. On the same day, I received 2 messages, one on one of my YouTube videos, and Chad Letsky also gave me a shout out on Twitter, and they were both regarding the way I like to support indie horror authors, and so it gave me the idea to to make a video. Like, why don't we make a top 10 list of indie horror authors that I enjoy reading? And so I started making the list, and the names just kept coming. And I realized I had like 30 authors. And I was like, holy cow. I'm going to have to split this video up into at least 3. Probably, I think I'm going to stop at about 3 videos. But I'm really happy that I did that list, because I don't know why I never did a top 10, or at least a top list of indie horror authors. I always include indie horror authors in a lot of my top 10 lists, but I never did one that was exclusively indie horror. And I think there's still a little bit of stigma. People still think that indie horror or indie literature, period, is bad, and it's not. I think a lot of writers today, and this isn't just in horror. I think you'll see it in science fiction and fantasy. They're taking the steps to make sure that they put out the best product possible. But there's still obviously people out there who just want to get stuff out, and they don't care about getting a good cover or getting some editing done. But I think, there's ways of being able to tell before buying the book. If the book has a really cheap cover, it looks like the author might have thrown together and not very well at all, then you might want to avoid buying that book. I see those all the time. That would be my best advice in avoiding buying really bad indie horror, because if they're not going to take the time to create a good cover, an eye-catching cover, something that's nice to look at, then they might not have taken the time to create a really good story, a compelling story, well edited, and all that. So I hope you checked out that video, and if you didn't, well, you can go to my channel, check it out, but I'll definitely put it in a card somewhere and maybe link it down there. And, I was going to talk about the first half of the Wheel of Time, but the TV series, because I read all those books I finished about a year ago in anticipation for this TV series. And I have some thoughts, but I don't think I'm going to do that here. It would, I think, kind of disrupt things, and I have a lot of thoughts, so I think I might make that into a separate video. So far, just to spoil my thoughts a little bit, is I'm enjoying the series, and there's a lot of differences between the books and the series itself, but I don't think it's a bad thing. And I'm sort of teetering on the edge of maybe this series being a little bit better than the books, just the story itself being presented a little bit better than the way everything was presented in the books. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with that. I guess we'll see with the rest of the season, but so far, so good, honestly. All right, so the books I've been reading recently, as I said, I've been reading a lot of Star Wars. I was reading Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, and I stopped reading it, not because I'm not enjoying it. I found that I was having trouble getting to it, and so maybe I wasn't enjoying it as much as I thought. But I'll tell you, what kind of took it over is this book here, Alphabet Squadron by Alexander Freed. This book is basically it's a fighter pilot story, and it's a pretty brutal one too. It's a war story. It's not a contemporary story. It's a military Air Force war story, and I'm absolutely enjoying this book. I'm not exactly speeding through it, but getting to read things with my eyes isn't as easy as it used to be. I used to be able to read a lot more when I was at home, and now I have to rely on a fairly easy work night where I maybe have an hour of freedom. Well, I wouldn't say freedom because I'm at work, but an hour free to sit around and just read. Because when I'm at home, it's hard to read with my eyes because my son is around and he's always interrupting you, and same with Jen, my wife. And it's just too frustrating to try to sit down and read at home. And by the time it's bedtime, my eyes are usually too tired, and so I start dozing off. So I rely a lot on audiobooks, but I would not recommend this book for audiobooks. Alexander Freed has a pretty weird, I wouldn't say weird, he has a kind of a complex writing style, and I don't think it would translate very well to audiobook. I might be wrong on that, but he has a lot of like long, sort of complex sentence structures that I know that I wouldn't be able to pay attention to. So if you're going to read this and you have sometimes trouble paying attention to audiobooks, you'd probably want to hit this one up with your eyes. But it's a lot of fun, especially if my slight description of it sounds appealing to you at all. I've always been interested in the Star Wars fighter pilots, especially like the X-Wing fighters, TIE fighters as well. It's just, I think it's been, in the expanded universe of Star Wars, it's been a bit of a thing, like with Rogue Squadron, and now Alphabet Squadron, which is a trilogy. And so, I don't know, it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. And also, I read Kenobi by John Jackson Miller. I really absolutely enjoyed this one. ObiWan Kenobi has always been a bit of a favorite of mine. Just that hermit, that hermit living in the desert alone, who happens to have these magical type powers, and he helps. You know, everyone who's watched Star Wars knows who Ben Kenobi is. He has a bit of a tragic story in the in the fourth episode, A New Hope, which is the very first movie, and so I think, you know, that made an impression on my young mind when I first watched Star Wars. 'Cause my first time watching that movie, I was pretty young. I was still a kid, and so Obi-Wan Kenobi has always left a huge impression on me, and I found it really fun reading John Jackson Miller's book about this, because although it's in Legends, I think it just missed being canon by a year or two. It was published in 2012, 2013, and I believe Disney bought it and made all the old books Legends instead, and all the newer books were going to be canon. So it just missed the mark, but I think this could be canon, Kenobi here, because it only takes place during a month, and all the characters that Kenobi talks with in this book, they don't need to be there when we meet Kenobi in A New Hope. I don't want to say it the way that it's in my brain, because it might spoil things. But it's not that a lot of people die, but not everyone will be there by the time all that happens. They're going to be living on another planet. So this book, you know, the story could very well be canon, easy. And it'll be interesting because John Jackson Miller has actually worked with Filoni, who is doing a lot of the TV adaptations for Disney. I forget what, I don't think it was for Kenobi, but I think, I can't remember what series they worked. I could even be wrong about that. I was just listening to a podcast where John Jackson Miller was discussing this, and I can't remember. It's pretty sad. All right, so anyways, Kenobi is a really good book. If you're interested in Obi-Wan Kenobi, I highly recommend it. It's the one thing I didn't like about it was it felt like kind of like a Star Trek episode. Honestly, it felt like a piece of filler. Honestly, it didn't, and I find that a lot with a lot of Star Wars books, that they. And of course, they're not supposed to overtake the main plots of the movies. And that makes a lot of sense. The books are almost always a sideshow, at least the ones I've read. And this one actually has its own feel to it, Alphabet Squadron here, because it exists in its own sort of tight circle of characters who are experiencing their own struggles that are separate from, just say, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Leia. You know, the ultimate three characters of the series proper. But Kenobi obviously could have been more in depth into what happened after Anakin betrayed everyone. But, you know, it's just basically a filler piece to a very much longer story that could have easily happened, because it takes place after, like, it's just like months after the whole situation with Anakin. Kenobi decides to go live on Tatooine and, you know, seclude himself from it. He's kind of hiding because the rest of the surviving Jedi are being hunted down and killed. So, yeah, take it for what you will. I find that I love these Star Wars books, despite their filler feel. But I've also been reading The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. I started with, well, I've read all the way up to book 7, I believe it was. And I've decided, I don't know if I'm going to, I think I'm going to take some time and reread the series before I finish it off. So I started with Leviathan Wakes, and I'm already about halfway through, and I just started it the other day. I absolutely love these books. There's just something about the writing that pulls you in like nothing else. So if you haven't read Leviathan Wakes, start with Leviathan Wakes, book number 1. You need to go in order with these, excuse me, you need to go in order with these ones, but I highly recommend reading it. It's a lot of fun. All right, so I think that's it, honestly. So thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. And if you have made it this far, leave me a little ghosty in the comment section, and I'll leave you a ghosty back. It is December. It was supposed to be about ghost stories and stuff like that for me this year, but I just couldn't do it. So I ended up going to different planets and different universes. All right, thank you for watching. Keep being safe, keep being creative, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.